Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel, and I'm joined by Jeff Berkowitz of Public Affairs TV in Chicago. And Jeff and I are going to be talking about a couple of key issues, both crime, the rise in crime, or a question of whether there's a rise in crime, and also we're going to talk about some of the economy. But Jeff, before we get started, I want to play a clip that's about 47 seconds long. Senator Cruz up on Capitol Hill speaking this week, and let's take a listen to what he said.
Gun control. Understand that today's Democrats in the Senate, these are not your father's Democrats. There are no moderate Democrats left in Congress. Today's Democrats, when it comes to guns, their objective is to disarm law-abiding citizens. They simultaneously embrace policies that release violent criminals from jail. They're not interested in locking up murderers. They're not interested in locking up gangbangers. They're not interested in locking up violent criminals. Instead, they systematically support policies that release violent criminals.
Jeff, what's your reaction to what Senator Cruz had to say?
Well, Senator Cruz is pointing out the major problem with gun control is not gun control per se, but it distracts people from the real ways to reduce crime. So he says there are no moderate Democrats. That is, there are no moderate Democrats who will go along and agree with the Republicans who believe that the way to reduce crime is to prosecute and to of course, you want to find the right person. You want to see that there's probable cause. You want to make the arrest, and then you want to prosecute. And then you want to put the person, if they're convicted, in jail for a significant amount of time to deter crime. He's saying that's what the hearing should be about. He says, well, no, we're not doing that. We're trying to disarm law-abiding citizens, and then we're releasing violent criminals from the jails and from the prisons. And he's saying these Democrats, they don't want to lock up the murderers. They don't want to lock up the rapists. They don't want to lock up the robbers. And this is a fundamental problem. We have to have a discussion in America. What is the way to deal with crime? What is the way to deter crime? And as opposed to continuously talking about gun control, more and more laws, and we don't enforce the gun control laws that we have.
Yeah, we often hear that. And by the way, talking about the Soros prosecutors, we got Kim Foxx, who's on the way out the door up in Chicago. Well, on a future show, we'll take a look at the race for the Cook County State's Attorney. But we've had the same problem across in big cities across the nation, in Philadelphia and St. Louis. We got rid of, in St. Louis, Kim Gardner was kicked out of office for failing to do her job of not prosecuting. In San Francisco, they got rid of the Soros prosecutor. Hopefully, we're going to get prosecutors who want to actually put criminals in jail and quit releasing them, but that's the argument. And I'll say for the audience that was a clip from Senator Cruz there. Really hit a nerve because there's over 175,000 people watched that one clip on the Illinois Channel.
Well, and Terry, you've traced out and described and outlined a book called Rogue Prosecutors by one of our previous guests, Cully Stimson, Charles Cully Stimson. And the rogue prosecutors are throughout the country. George Soros donated more than $1 billion to focus on 72 prosecutors around the country that account for about 65% of the population of the United States. And he won those elections. They're relatively inexpensive. And it changed the way in which we deal with crime over especially the last 7 or 8 years. And so we've had a major problem with crime that continues in Chicago and many other cities around the country. So we need to correct that. We need to start doing what we were doing previously, the fundamentals of dealing with crime, prosecution, putting people who are convicted in jail or prison, and don't parole them. Don't say probation, meaning they don't do any time. And we need to especially deal with the habitual criminals. And this is an ongoing problem. We've done, as our regular viewers would know, 2 shows with Cully Stimson. Cully Stimson. and dealing with this issue of rogue prosecutors.
Yeah, he talked
see,
about,
we'll
but here,
see-
Jeff, let me
we'll-
insert. You and I also covered, obviously, the race for mayor of Chicago, and crime was an issue. And the tough on crime candidate didn't win. So what's going on with Chicago? What's going on with the Chicago citizenry? They either want to have a city that's going to have crime addressed or not, and they seem to have voted for the not.
Well, Terry, a major theme of this show, as we said, is dealing with Chicago crime. And I think we have a clip from the governor talking. He's being interviewed, if you can call it that.
He participated in a talk with Crane's Chicago. And
we have the.
You want to?
Here's the point.
Let's go ahead and play that.
Just to introduce this, let's play the clip and give the let's get the governor give his view about crime.
And his argument is it's doing well. Let's listen.
Crime in the city of Chicago, violent crime. Let's start with that because I think that's the thing we should all be most concerned about. Every crime is of concern. Violent crime actually has been coming down for 3 years. But in particular, over the last year, violent crime is coming down. Does it make everybody feel safer to know that? Not yet, but it is true, and you should go look at the statistics. The city of Chicago CPD publishes statistics. You can see where the problem areas are, right, with car theft and robberies and so on. But shootings and murders have come down significantly.
So, Jeff, the governor says crime's getting better in Chicago. Things are under control.
Well, specifically, he said violent crime has been coming down for 3 years. Count them, 3 years in Chicago, he says, and particularly in the last year, and particularly murders and shootings. But he said violent crime. He didn't just say murders and shooting. Violent crime, he says, for the last 3 years,
right.
Significantly, maybe the last year. So he invites us. He says, folks, you can look this up. Look at the data that the Chicago Police Department puts out. So we did. We didn't do it. Wirepoints did it. They looked up the data, and let's take a look at what the data say.
Well, let's take a look right here. And
violent crime. This violent crime in Chicago, it reaches a total of 18,000, more than 18,000 in 2023 year to date. That's through November 26, year to date. And so we see that on the right end of that chart. We're at over 18,000 for 2023 through November 26. Well, adjust all those prior years, 2019, 2020, 21, 22, not the whole year, but to make it comparable, those are the crimes that occurred in each year through November 26th of that year. And as you can see, Terry, crime is going up. The governor is elected in 2018, okay? So let's say 2019 is policies, which affect the state of Illinois, but he's got a way of affecting Chicago. He's got a bully pulpit. He can talk to the mayor and the state's attorney of Cook County. And does he set that up? Let's see what happens to crime in 2020 after he's been there a year. It goes up slightly. It goes up 236. These are counting all violent crimes. And and the crimes he's looking at there are murders, criminal sexual assault, robberies, and aggravated battery. We're looking at that.
Well, let's take a look here. This is the violent crime continues to grow in Chicago. Now, by the way, let me point out, while people go, well, that's Wirepoints, the source here, it says...
Terry, excuse me. Before you go to the next slide, let's pull this data apart. Let's go back to slide 1.
All right, here we're back.
I
just want to point out that this isn't Wirepoints making this stuff up. The source is the Chicago Police Department.
Right. Well, that's
in case they can't
item.
read that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
But the point here is crime goes up in 2020 by 236. We're just counting all these crimes, and then it goes down slightly from 2020 to 2021. It goes down about 40, but then it goes up significantly when we go from 2021
it goes up 3%,
to 2022.
and then it goes up 14%.
Yes. So where is this downward crime that he's talking about for 3 years? It ain't happening. That's the point. And here are the data. And if he wants to dispute this, he's got to show where are these data wrong. And he doesn't do it. He doesn't cite to any data. So now we can go and sort of break this down now to the next slide, where we talk about, again, violent crime is continuing to grow in Chicago, up nearly 20% compared to what? When the governor came in and he became the governor in 2019. So that's a 23%. You can see on the right end of the chart comparing 2023 total of these of murder is actually up.
That's amazing.
From 2019 to 2023. It's 2019 when the governor was first year of when Pritzker was in his first year as governor, we had 464 homicides. In 2023, we have 569. So over that 4-year period, it's gone up 23%.
And an explosion in robberies we see here.
Well, and you hit the main point, Terry, because when you listen to the networks, the local networks in Chicago, every day there's armed robbery. And these armed robberies are just going through the roof. And they're organized, there's a team, and they're a standard robbery, armed robbery in the city of Chicago has a team of 4. Somebody's walking in an area, perhaps anywhere in Chicago. Doesn't have to be used to be crime was mostly on the south side, west side. Now it's all over north side as well. And say it's 4:00 in the morning, and somebody's walking. They're going to an early train. There's a car that looks around, makes sure there's nobody else around. They pull over, say it's a woman because
well, you're referring to a video that was.
That was shown by Chicago Workbench, right? And what the video shows in a nutshell is there's one of the team members has a long gun, which is really scary to people and is fairly accurate. He jumps out and he points at any cars that might come near him. And if there's a car that stopped at the red light, he's waving it on and the car goes on. They're not going to fight with a long gun. And meanwhile, the other 3 gentlemen jump out and then frisk the lady, take bracelets or phones, whatever they can get, her purse and so forth, and they're gone.
Yeah, and here she was like carrying her suitcase, and like 3 or 4 guys jump out of the car and hold her up. And fortunately, she wasn't physically hurt. But when you're victimized like that, it really takes away from you your sense of personal security. I mean, for the rest of your time, you're going to not have the same sense of security and being able to relax walking around the city once you've been victimized by this.
You're somewhat traumatized, Terry. You're unprotected. They've taken your gun away. They've made it difficult for concealed carry. And so if you're this woman, you don't have a gun that you could at least take out if you saw these guys coming. You're completely exposed. You're completely vulnerable. And it's the woman or man, if this is man in this case, you're going to be traumatized. You're going to remember this. This is the picture.
Well, and let's take a look, Jeff, at our next slide when we talk about the number of people of Chicago victimized by crime.
You're jumping ahead. Let's go back to the slide you just put up there, because I want people to understand these data, So if we can go back there. Again, if you're looking at this slide, you see a bunch of numbers, and it can be kind of intimidating. But let's focus on robbery, which we were just talking about. And this says robbery could be armed robbery. I think in most of these cases it would be. It says robbery. Let's look over there under 2023, the current year. 9,963 robberies. And to the left of that, we have, what was it last year? 7,900. So it's about a 40% increase this year. Remember, the governor has said.
Well, actually, that's 40% from 2019.
Oh, excuse me. Right, it's 2,000, which is about 25%
1 year increase
in that 1 year. Okay.
But look at aggregate right below that. Aggravated battery.
Right, and that's flat. I mean, that's a minus 1%
No,
for
but
the 4 year
I'm not, I'm
period.
just saying, when you look at the number of victims here in Chicago, and
Right.
the 18,000 it adds up to in 2023,
Right.
18,000. And, I don't know if the other thing that we have talked about in the past, and we should mention, that what's going on with the police department and the lack of support from the administration. And we have 911 calls when you are a victim or you're having someone breaking in, they call 911. There's not enough police to go around. We sometimes have up to 30 minutes before a 911 call is responded to in Chicago.
No, and we had 400,000 in 2021 priority calls, priority one, priority two, go unanswered at all. Okay. And so it's not that it's taking 30 minutes. It's taking, they're just not responding. They're not there.
We need to move
Okay.
along if we're going to
And-
get these other slides in, I'll say. So let's
Okay,
take a look
okay,
at
well,
number 3
okay.
here. And we got the number of Chicagoans victimized. We were talking about the number, and shocking number here in 2023, 31,658.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Jeff, you watch the news. I can't see Chicago news. We played the clip. The governor says crime is down. Is anyone besides you and I challenging him on these numbers? I mean, we're not picking on the governor. We're trying to service the viewers to know what's factual. We're giving them a factual basis instead of just playing a soundbite where someone
I have
claims
no
it's down.
reason why Cranes, for instance, maybe the interviewer couldn't have these data available right then, but wouldn't you think they would do a follow-up article challenging what the governor had said? No,
What
it's
about
left to
anyone
us.
else? I don't want to pick on Cranes per se, but what about any of the local TV news? Is anyone
they
putting
don't
these?
do
I'm
this
sure
kind of
they
stuff.
report crime. Every local TV station
do.
does.
No,
But
here's
are
what
they
they do,
putting it
Terry.
in context? Are they doing what we're doing? Are they saying, here's the
No.
facts?
Terry, they tell you the news. News. What is new? So on Friday, if they're reporting, they're telling you what happened last night. And they do a pretty good job of this. At the 11 a.m. news the next morning, the 9 a.m. news, WGN puts this out, CBS puts this out, but they're focusing on what happened last night. And they'll dissect, they'll show, here, folks, and they'll put up a map showing here are 4 robberies within 2 hours that occurred on the north side, where they were, the street locations, and so forth. That's what they're doing, Terry. And they'll do the next thing the next day. But they don't synthesize. They don't provide the context. They do a good job of telling you what happened yesterday. They tell you the weather yesterday, Terry.
How much of
or
let me
today.
ask, you have a sense of the citizenry.
Yes.
How much is crime on the mind of Chicago citizens walking the streets?
Well, it's on their minds. It's on their minds a lot. And you would think there would be an uproar. You would think, given an opportunity to vote on this, they would vote for the candidate who's talking about the issues we are. That was Paul Vallis. Now, a number of people voted for Paul Vallis, but not as many as voted for Brandon Johnson. It was a close election, 52% to 48%. But you would think, given the news that describes this, given the trauma that we've talked about, that there'd be more of a mobilization of voters to focus on that issue.
Let me bring up
But
number
for some
4 slide here, because this is, as people can see while we're on crime here, 2023 major crime hits a post-COVID record, up 58% over 2019, up 18% over just last year.
Right. Again, that's a staggering figure. Those are major crimes. And you might wonder, okay, what do we have as major crimes? We have murder, we have criminal sexual assault, robbery, aggravated battery, burglary, theft, motor vehicle theft. Those are the components. And when you break them down, all of those categories are up except for murder. So the governor points to the one category he can, homicides, and says it's down. It's not down from 2019, but it is down over several years of that.
Well, let me ask, are they talking, has Mayor Johnson, is he moving more towards the soft on crime policies, or is he getting pushback and saying, Mr. Mayor, you got to do something about the crime in Chicago? What's happening with the Johnson administration thus far?
he doesn't say much, if anything, about crime nor about education. We can talk about that another day, but those are the two major problems in Chicago. We don't teach our kids how to read. Across the state, only a third of the kids are learning how to read, two-thirds are not. In Chicago, by minorities, we have numbers like 17% of Blacks learning how to read, 22% of Hispanics learning how to read, 78% of Hispanics aren't learning how to read, and 83% of Blacks aren't. Doesn't talk about that. Doesn't talk about the data of crime. Doesn't talk about crime. The governor and the mayor seem to be in denial.
Well, and when
The
the
first
governor,
step-
again, I'm not
the
trying
first
to
step-
pick on the governor, but he's the one that says in a public forum that crime is down and happy days are here again, and he's painting a rosy picture. What he's
but more
saying doesn't
important-
match up with the facts that we're sharing with people.
Well, more importantly, too, he's got the bully pulpit of being governor. You know, I understand
He also,
he's
he
not.
also has the power to send in the National Guard or pressure the mayor to, get his act together and crack down on crime.
Right, or the state's attorney.
Or the state's attorney.
And folks, this is not just a Chicago problem, because people are watching this from downstate, they're watching it from Rockford, they're watching it from Peoria. There are a number of inner city similar to the inner city of Chicago that have these crime problems. There are other prosecutors around the state that are sympathetic or similar to what we call a Soros-funded prosecutor, a Kim Foxx prosecutor, somebody who doesn't really seem to believe in prosecuting. Kim Foxx might say, prisons are obsolete. Angela Davis said that 40 years ago. Those Soros
And on the other hand,
prosecutors
people watching,
think that.
as we showed, is Ted Cruz. Now, Senator Durbin of Illinois, Senator Dick Durbin is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee that held that hearing that Ted Cruz was objecting to, that they were dealing with issues that weren't addressing the rise in crime, weren't addressing the lawlessness on the streets, not addressing these prosecutors who don't prosecute. So there's going to be some pushback, especially if in next year's election, the Republicans take control of the U.S. Senate, and they are favored to do that because the Democrats have to defend a lot more of the seats up in the cycle of 2024. And there's also a good chance, as people know, that Donald Trump could be coming back to the White House. So Chicago, if they are facing a Republican in the White House and a Republican Senate, are probably going to get a lot of pushback from the national government to say you better crack down and get going on addressing these issues and not just leaving it up to the Cook County prosecutor.
Well, and as we go toward the 2024 election, crime, I think, will be an issue. Of course, borders will be an issue. Inflation will be an issue. Foreign policy will be an issue. The Israel-Hamas war will be an issue, and the Ukraine war. So, added to all those national issues, because people tend to think crime is not a national issue, but it has become one because, as we pointed out, the Soros-funded prosecutors were elected across the country, 65% of the population. So the problem is when people who are critical of Kim Foxx and what she has done in Chicago and Cook County over the last 7 years, there are many other prosecutors around the country that are quite similar. And the point is, for others in Illinois who are watching this program outside of Chicago, well, it's Cook County is a problem, but so, as I said, are Peoria and Elgin and
We are getting gangs
around the state. They have the same or similar problems, and of course,
Jeff,
these
hang on,
folks
let me
visit
get a word
Chicago.
in here. The point is, there's obviously a lot of this is gang violence. It's organized crime at the gang level. A lot of these gangs are also controlled, speaking of the border, by the Mexican cartels. That's not me making that up. That comes from law enforcement. And some of these gangs have been, over the last number of years, moving out of Chicago and going down into places like the Urbana-Champaign, where the University of Illinois is, going into Decatur, as you're just saying, going into these other cities. So this is an infestation of crime coming out of Chicago, and taking root in some of these other cities. It is a statewide issue, and one that I think the governor and the state legislature, if not the federal Congress, is going to have to get a handle on, or we're going to see these numbers, as we've shown the people, explode across the state.
We're running out of time, so maybe we can whet the appetite for what we perhaps can do in the next show. The other thing that the governor talked about briefly in his interview was the economy. He says, we're doing fine. Illinois is doing fine. Well, and he gives one example, perhaps, of bringing one entity to Illinois, and how he says we have a story to tell now, and we're telling that story better. So maybe we can whet the appetite by giving a few slides. Let's go over these quickly.
We have just a couple of minutes here, but very quickly, where the governor is saying the economy is back, there are reasons to be for improvement that the governor can claim, but still, we see that employment is down 2%. During the governor's tenure. And in manufacturing, let me just move along here. Since the governor took office, Illinois suffered the second worst loss of manufacturing jobs among neighboring states. That's from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, by the way. Again, that's not Wirepoints making things up. We didn't get a chance to go through those as much as we can, but a lot that we did cover on the crime issue, and it is a growing issue. And Jeff, again, in the future, we look to take a look more in depth at the state's attorney's race now that Kim Foxx is not going to be running for re-election. We'll take a look at who is. And you and I, Jeff, are now in the month of December as we record this, so Christmas is right around the corner. Happy holidays to everyone. We hope you had a great Thanksgiving.
And Hanukkah is right around the corner, too, in a few days.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much. We'll see you next time.